Well, hello, friends, and it's another week of getting together in the Word so that the Word gets into us. We're finishing up First Corinthians this week, and we're coming to what is arguably one of the most well-known chapters in the whole letter of First Corinthians, and rightfully so, because Paul is really going to drill down on a very important topic, a virtuous topic, and we're talking about the subject of love. In fact, some people call chapter 13 the love chapter. And you're going to see why in just a moment. If you don't know that already, you'll know in just a few minutes. So I want us to look specifically at his descriptives that he assigns to love as he begins to give us something of a definition of sorts of what love is. I want us to look at verses 4 through 8 and do our best to kind of mine those out a little bit because it's rich. We're not going to have enough time, but at least we can touch on each one a little. So pick up in verse 4. Love is, here we go, patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It's not arrogant. It's not rude. It's not self-seeking. It is not irritable and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in rejoicing in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. All right, so here we see Paul on the tail end of, addressing another issue that was causing division in the church. There were some who were being boastful about their spiritual gift. Most of them would have been those who had tongues and prophecy. Meanwhile, looking down on others who did not have those gifts, were not able to display those gifts. And those who were being looked down upon were looking at those who had the gifts with envy and jealousy. So you had arrogance, boasting, you had jealousy, envy, and of course you had two separate groups. You had factions being created, division being started, and which of course is not consistent with the gifts themselves. God did not grant those spiritual gifts for the purpose of creating division in this church. He granted those gifts for edification. And so if you know this chapter, and hopefully you read through the whole thing, Paul starts it off by talking about those things. Hey, if I have this gift, or if I have all knowledge, or if I have this, but I don't have love, then I really don't have anything. And then he comes down to verses 4 through 8, and he says this. Here's what love is, friends. Love is patient. The word patient, sometimes translated long-suffering, is talking about my attitude toward a person, not necessarily my attitude toward a situation or a circumstance. Now, those may be mutual, that the person's going through a situation and it's negatively affecting me or it's causing a burden to come on me, but I'm long-suffering. I'm patient with the individual. Secondly, it's kind. Not only am I enduring a hardship because of them, but I'm looking for the best possible outcome for them. I want them to experience goodness. I want them to experience the grace of God. And it's fascinating that Paul begins this descriptive with two of the gifts of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit. You look in Galatians chapter, I believe it's 5, verse 22, Paul says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. So here Paul's incorporating two of those within the definition of love. Love itself has those gifts. Love does not envy. So as I'm looking toward another, I don't have the attitude of desiring what they have. Secondly, it's not boastful, meaning that if I have that gift, I'm not boasting about it. I'm not puffed up in the head. I'm not making something bigger than what it really is. It's not arrogant. So in that sense, I'm not holding something over somebody's head. If I do have this privilege or this gift, I'm not going to hold it over somebody else's head. I'm not going to be a braggart, is basically what that word is saying there. And it's not rude. So here we see Paul talking about after love is, he gives us 3, 4 in a row, actually 6 I think it is, not envy, not boastful, not arrogant, not rude, not self-seeking. Of course, self-seeking speaks for itself, right? Looking for the greatest possible outcome for old number one. I don't really care how it's going to affect anybody else. I'm just looking out for how it's going to affect me. Paul says love doesn't do that. And then, of course, he says love's not irritable. Because love doesn't look out for itself, it's not irritated when things don't turn out the best for self. Whereas on the flip side of that, if I am self-seeking, then when something doesn't turn out for my greatest good or my greatest accomplishment or my greatest boasting, then I am going to be irritable. I'm going to get sideways with people. I'm going to be disappointed with people, and ultimately I may seek to even cause harm to people. Paul says love doesn't do that. Love is not irritable. And accordingly, it's not keeping a record of wrongs experienced. So that's an accounting term. Paul says love doesn't have categories and then records that go in those categories, Bob, he did me good, he did me good, he did me good. Bob didn't do me good. But love doesn't keep a running account. It's not trying to keep a tally of what somebody has or has not done to me. Love doesn't do that, he says. And so after giving us that extensive list of what love is and what love doesn't do, he comes right back again and comes back and says, love finds no joy in unrighteousness. So love but rejoices in the truth. Now I want to talk about that for just a moment. Because in many cases, we're told to tolerate something or tolerate the actions of someone based on love. Based on love. Now, remember, love is patient. I may be patient with the person, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to tolerate the action or the attitude that's being perpetuated by that person. In fact, Paul says on the contrary, love rejoices in the truth. That means that if I'm truly loving that person, then I'm going to seek that I'm going to seek for truth to rule and reign in that situation. I'm not going to be content to let them consistently live in a lie or consistently live out a lie. Instead, I'm going to lovingly approach them. I'm going to lovingly confront them to bring about the most righteous good possible. That's so counterintuitive to everything we're taught in culture today. That we're taught that love is accepting, that love is tolerant, that love is not judgmental, all these things that love is not. When Paul says, here's what love is. Love rejoices in truth. Love does not tolerate unrighteousness. That's so different than what culture is promoting today. But that's agape. That's agape love in its pure sense, that love rejoices in the truth. And because it rejoices in the truth, it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. That's a pretty powerful list that Paul's going to end this thing on. Bear means to cover. It comes from the root word roof. So it means to cover, and it's the idea of protecting. So love is going to protect. When the world may persecute, love is going to protect. Secondly, love believes all things. Love anticipates and holds on to the greatest possible outcome available. Love believes it's going to happen. Love holds on to the greatest possible outcome available. And then number 3, hopes all things. It's rooted in another virtue, which is hope. Love is believing that it will indeed come about. And then lastly, it endures. Love is an enduring virtue. In fact, Paul goes on to say at the end of this chapter, now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. It's an enduring virtue, and it never fails. And we need more of it. We need more of this love, not the love that the world is proponent of. We need more love as Paul has poetically presented it, and more importantly, as Christ has demonstrated it. So let's make that commitment this week. We're commanded to love God completely, all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We are commanded to love our neighbors. We love ourselves. Let's make sure that the love we demonstrate for God and for our neighbor is consistent with the love that's been defined here for us by Paul in 1 Corinthians 4. And when we're characterized by this level of love, and we can't help but to go out, friends, and do what God has commissioned us to do. That is, to live sent.